Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, this is Mothman Warrior 1.0. Tonight we're going to have an exciting interview with Jeff Wamsley. Is that correct?
Yeah, Wamsley.
Wamsley? Oh, okay. We're having He's infamously known as being an expert on the Mothman. So we'll ask him a variety of questions and get to hear what he says. And last week we had Nick Redfern on, and that was a exciting show. And I bet tonight will be just as great or even better. So, and also on the line with me is King Sasquatch, also known as Jeremy.
Yep.
And this is Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio.
Yeah, so the first question, I was gonna have Jeff just explain a little bit about himself and what got him into the Mothman and all that. And then from there, we're gonna get started on some questions about the Mothman after that, and then a little bit of other questions.
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And most people that are familiar with the Mothman story know that a lot of the sightings of this creature or bird or whatever this thing was originated in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, back in the mid-'60s. And I was about 5, 6 years old when all this started. And what was kind of weird about the whole thing is I lived almost about 3 or 4 doors down from the people who saw it first. What happened back in November 1966 is you had 2 young couples that were riding around about 11 o'clock at night on the outskirts of Point Pleasant in what we call the TNT area. That's an old ammunition depot from World War II. But after the war ended, a lot of kids would go up there and kind of run around and drag race and kind of meet up with their friends and things like that. But they ran across what they thought at first was just a man standing in the road, but as they got a little closer, they realized that it was some sort of a creature. There's theories that it was a gigantic sandhill crane or a bird of some sort. They were chased back into town, reaching speeds 85, 95 miles an hour, came back into town, reported it to the sheriff's department, and then for about a year and a half after that, you had over 100 reported sightings to the authorities and stuff. So I kind of got interested in it as I got a little bit older because I realized, that I knew all these people. I started kind of researching it for myself and got into writing a few books with a lot of interviews with these people and collected a lot of archives and rare, newspaper clippings and all kinds of stuff like that. So kind of grown into, several books, Mothman Museum, Mothman Festival, all that good stuff. So and here we are now talking about, Mothman on your show. So that's kind of blossomed into, almost a full-time occupation. I actually teach graphic design, as a regular job, but my background was in music retail. I owned a chain of record stores, and now it kind of went into the Mothman Museum and stuff like that.
I was just wondering, the festival that comes around, do you usually host the festival, or?
Yeah, actually that festival was created by myself and another person there in Point Pleasant named Carolyn Harris. When we started the festival, it was about a year or two after the movie had came out, and we thought it'd be kind of neat. We called it like a convention at first, just kind of people that were interested in the movie and the actual story and things like that. But it started the first year. I think maybe we had, 400 or 500 people show up, and now it's about 5,000 people show up in September of every year. And it's a good place for people like you guys, to show up and network and meet other people. That's and it's not all pretty much Mothman. I mean, we kind of gain a lot of interest from people, with the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, UFOs, paranormal type stuff. So it's a Mothman festival, but I've noticed that it seems to kind of appeal to a broad array of people to come. So it's like a family reunion every year. They come and set up booths and vendors and writers and authors and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of neat.
Well, another couple of questions I was thinking of. So the Mothman, for people that don't know, what would you say would be like a general description of the Mothman?
Most of the people that were seeing this thing were describing it 6 to 7 feet tall, a wingspan of 8 to 10 feet, and the most common description described 2 red eyes, almost the size of baseballs. That's what most of these witnesses remembered about what they were seeing was, there again, some people said it was a gigantic bird. Other people said it was a creature of some sort, something that they couldn't really explain what it was. But there's countless theories out there as to what it was, and I don't know if anybody will ever really be able to figure it out. But it never really physically harmed anybody, but it scared a lot of people because this thing would pop up, when it was least expected. So that's 6 to 7 feet tall, bird-like characteristics, no beak or anything. But the red glowing eyes, that was the most common description that most people were having. A lot of UFO activity going on at that time too, so people were thinking there might have been a connection.
Well, I know I was reading one of your books the other day because I have I think 2 of them. The Facts Behind the Red Eye. I was reading that, and some people said that they think it's like almost ghostly-like, or some people say it was alien-related.
Right.
Do you think it's more of like a physical creature or like an alien type thing, or?
I would say more. I tend more to be, a physical type creature.
Like an earthbound, like an earthly creature.
Yeah, because there was, I'd mentioned, in other couple interviews too. Some people, we are in the Bible Belt here, and some people thought it brought on some sort of a religious connection, at the time, because some people were seeing it and they felt that this is some sort of an angel of doom or whatever, But most of the people that I've talked to, this thing, like ran out in front of the car, almost like a Bigfoot sighting or Sasquatch or whatever, and there was a physical sighting. They could reach out and possibly touch it or whatever and things like that. But there was also that group of people that thought that it was more of a vision, warning people of disaster, and the movie really played that up a lot too. So there's kind of mixed feelings on stuff. Most everybody that saw it, were not real happy to be, seeing it either. They were scared.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Bigfoot and stuff in the area, do you think that it could be mistaken for a Bigfoot or anything like that, or is there Bigfoot sightings in the area? Or?
I think there has been up in Ohio, up in mid section of the state, northern Ohio. There's a map that a guy brings every year to the festival. He does maps for all the different states, and it's got all the sightings in Ohio. As a matter of fact, I think we had one in the museum, and there's some Bigfoot sightings up in that area. Anything's possible. But most people did say that it had wings. I mean, so that might kind of eliminate that theory. But anything's possible. I've heard every theory and explanation you can think of.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of the sandhill crane theory? Like, do you think that that's even plausible, or do you think that it's not even like a possibility for the creature these people were seeing?
Well, there's always the chance, but the people that I've talked to, some of those original witnesses, were really what had happened was to kind of calm the people in town and of Point Pleasant. They brought in a couple, like a professor from West Virginia University, who just told everybody all they were seeing was a sandhill crane. But what that ended up doing was really insulting the intelligence of those witnesses, and that's why a lot of those people won't do interviews, is because they figure, most people will have a preconceived idea of what it is, and they're not going to believe what I'm telling them anyway. And I have talked to a few people that are adamant on that it was a bird of some sort. It was a gigantic bird, but nevertheless, it was a bird. It wasn't any type of a creature or monster or anything, or beast or anything like that. But, I think that really, insulted a lot of the people that were, putting their reputation on the line to go to the authorities and everything. And, a lot of them were made fun of and, poke fun at and things like that. So that's why it's so hard to get some of those people to talk about it.
So I know because we interview Bigfoot witnesses and UFO witnesses and things like that, and when people bring up the fact, like, could it have been a bear or something like that, they just get fed up and don't want to interview, or they start getting mad and saying stuff like, well,
yeah,
like the average knowledge of the average person would tell the difference between a bear and a Sasquatch, or like an airplane and a UFO, for instance.
Yeah, and I think some of them kind of take it personally, that, you as an interviewer, what you're trying to do is, get the knowledge and the information to kind of relay to your listeners and things like that. You're just asking, standard questions and things like that just to see. But I think sometimes they take it as, you're calling me stupid or something.
Yeah.
I know what I saw. And there again, it's been 45 years since a lot of those sightings in Point Pleasant. And I think some of those witnesses just really get tired of the repetition of the same old all the time. And, I've had some of them just tell me, say, look, I'm done talking about it. I know what I saw, and I'm just tired of telling everybody the same story and stuff, So,
yeah.
I guess it would get old if you were one of those witnesses and you knew that every time you did an interview, it'd be the same questions all the time and stuff. So, but, most people are just inquisitive, and they want to, learn from what they have to say. They don't mean anything personal about it,
Yeah. Well, speaking of Point Pleasant and the Mothman, do you think that it's still there today, or is there any reports from recent times?
The last person that I interviewed saw something up there in the TNT area in about the late 80s, like 88 or 89, with the museum there and everything. We have people that'll come in once in a while and mention something. It's not near as concentrated as it was back in 66 all the way to probably the early 70s and everything. I get emails constantly, all the time, daily, from places all over the world. Lebanon, Serbia, Croatia, New Mexico, and whether or not that stuff is related to what people were seeing here in Point Pleasant remains to be seen. I can't verify that for anything. There's always the chance. Something could still be out there. I just think that it seems like when people are looking for it, they never see it. Back then, people had no clue that they were going to encounter something like that. And then when it started happening, everybody wanted to get up there in the TNT area, to look for it and to shoot at it and to kill it and everything else. And then that's when, the National Guard came in and kind of quarantined that area off, which then made everybody think that it was some sort of a conspiracy-type cover-up and stuff. So it just kind of one thing led to the other,
Yeah. Another question I was wondering was, I know you said that you hear about these creatures being spotted all around the U.S.
All over the world, yeah.
Well, for the United States ones and other places, does the description of the Mothman change, or is it just a lot of similar stuff? Or?
Yeah, big wingspan, red eyes, flying over top of cars, things like that, peering into people's windows and stuff, and I don't know if you've seen that latest Monster Quest that was on a few weeks ago. They did did one on Mothman. Now, those people that were on there, the people in Wisconsin and the guy in California, I've never talked to any of those people or anything, but they described what's real close to what people were seeing here.
I was going to say, I was going to interject for a second, and while we were on the topic of multiple Mothman sightings across the world, there's always I'd like to bring up a couple specific cases that I'd like to hear your opinion on, Jeff. One topic we always get into, and we can get into some debate sometimes with some listeners, is whether the Jersey Devil and the Mothman maybe they're very similar, maybe if not the same creature.
Right. I got asked that just a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact, and yeah, you know, there's similar descriptions there on that, and but that is a question that gets brought up from time to time because, you know, it's pretty much East Coast sightings. It seems like a lot on that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, from what I gathered, you know, there was you know, in this area on the eastern side of the country and stuff, but that is a valid, you know, question. But people do bring that up from time to time because, you know, they get that description of this creature, you know, stirring up around like a chicken coop or something around a house and things like that. Could be. I mean, you know, it could be, you know, close. I've never really had anybody here in the Point Pleasant area come to me and say, hey, this is the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm also, I found some information on the internet that actually brings up a similarity between the legend of the Thunderbird and the Mothman. And I'm seeing just a rough drawing of a carving of a Thunderbird, and it looks a lot like a Mothman to me. And it seems pretty interesting that, you know, Native Americans would have seen this creature. Like Native Americans they also have legends of seeing things that are like the Sasquatch. Do you think there's any correlation between these things?
Yeah, I think so. And John Keel always thought the same thing too. You know, he mentioned the Thunderbirds in a lot of his interviews and stuff. And, you know, Point Pleasant is really rich in Native American history. I mean, you know, you had a lot of Indian tribes in this area and things like that. But you know, and you hear a lot about these cave paintings and stuff like down in you know, Mexico and New Mexico and places like that, Texas. You know, they find these paintings and stuff of these gigantic birds and things. So yeah, that's a valid question too. Some people that I've actually interviewed compared it to a prehistoric bird, you know, like a pterodactyl or whatever. I've actually talked to a few people that described it in the same, you know, same sense and everything. So, but yeah, the Native American history is really goes deep here in Point Pleasant, Ohio, the Ohio Valley, pretty much in general.
Well, something I was just wondering, just out of curiosity, I subscribed to World Explorer magazine recently, and they had a really big article. They said that they found in New Mexico, like you were saying, they found pottery and cave paintings of a Mothman-like creature.
Oh, yeah? Huh.
I'm trying to remember what it was called. I didn't really read the whole article. I just skimmed over it. I didn't get a chance to read it yet, but I wasn't sure if you ever read that or seen that yet.
No, I haven't seen that or anything. You know, I get emails from people, you know, in that area and things like that. And there again, you know, John Keel had always talked about Thunderbirds. He called them Garudas. It was like another name for them. You know, these giant birds flying over these Indian villages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's the book is wide. I mean, I've even had people describe them as gargoyles. You know.
Yeah.
You know, so, which is even scarier. I mean, I would think. You know, it's you know, you talk to different people, but they all describe, you know, about the same thing. I mean, nobody's ever came to me and said it was bright pink and, you know, had you know, blue eyes or anything. It's always been the same description, general description and everything. So.
Well, we have a question right now, actually, in one of our chat rooms. They're asking us, out of different places of the country, just like North America, is there any certain hotspot lately or any places where these sightings come out of more than other places or any?
As far as the U.S. goes, you know, it seems like it's a lot you know, here in the eastern part. I mean, the Monster Quest had Wisconsin, you know, and you trickle them down into Ohio and West Virginia and things like that. It's real hard to you know, to pinpoint, you know, because, you know, of course, you know, all the sightings and stuff might not be valid. You never know. It seems like I get more emails from overseas, other countries, than I do the United States. And what we try to do on the website, mothmanlive.com, is post, you know, some of those sightings and stuff, you know, so people can kind of get an idea we're getting ready to kind of revamp that website here real soon, so it'll be easier for people to kind of leaf through those sightings and see where they're from. And, you know,
well, I know that we were going to go, like us included, we were going to go try to look for one probably in June or July, but we weren't really sure where to go besides Point Pleasant, because if you look them up online, you can't really find anything besides on your website.
Yeah.
Like any other place where they're sighted or spotted.
Yeah, you know, we get a lot of sightings and everything. We're trying to figure out a way that's just going to be easier for the person that's on the website to kind of get that information. And, of course, you know, we can't really put people's names on there and stuff unless they really want us to, but we don't want to get caught up in that or anything. But, you know, then there's also the sightings that, you know, the movie portrayed the, you know, the harbinger of doom and destruction and all that. And it seems like when you have like a disaster somewhere or whatever, people will email and say, hey, we saw something, you know, flying. There was a plane crash there a few months ago. And somebody from Lebanon sent us an email and stuff. So there again, you know, I have not talked to those people face to face or in person. It's hard to really validate everything and stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you
Yeah, Jared loves that movie.
Yeah. Oh, the Mothman Prophecies movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that movie, you know, and for people
He loves the accuracies.
Aren't real familiar with the Mothman story, it does confuse people sometimes, you know.
Yeah, I didn't really like it too much myself, actually, which is why.
It's kind of a slow mover, I thought, but, you know, I think people here in Point Pleasant were expecting more of a Jeepers Creepers type movie, you know.
Yeah.
But anyways, you know, the documentaries that come out are pretty interesting, I think, you know, like the Monster Quest.
Yeah, definitely.
And things like that. That gives people really a little more accurate representation of what really happened, I think, you know.
Yeah, well, another question we just got was, if you were going to go look for one of these creatures, how would you find one?
Well, I think if everybody knew that, you know, then the mystery would be solved. But, you know, we get people, like I said, that come to the museum, come to Point Pleasant, especially, you know, during the summer months and stuff. And, you know, they just, a lot of cameras and things like that. They'll go to the TNT area. And
Like, would it be similar to looking for a Sasquatch, for instance? Like,
yeah,
same sort of situation?
You know, they'll go to where the sightings were documented back then, you know. But a lot of the buildings and stuff that people were seeing this thing was the North Power Plant up there. They tore that building down back in the early 90s, but that was a 3-story factory building up there. And I would say 75% of the sightings happened in and around that building. And people were seeing it on top of the building, in and around it. And they thought that, you know, if it was some sort of a big giant bird or whatever, that it was kind of nesting or roosting in that building and stuff, you know. But that was a really eerie building up there and stuff. I wish it was still there so people could see it, you know, but it was a monstrous structure.
Well, another thing I was wondering was, have you ever seen the documentary The Mothman's Photographer, Jeff?
Yeah, I have. Andy Colvin.
Yeah. That was kind of strange, I thought, like, kind of confusing. I was just wondering, in one of the scenes on the movie, he's driving up to people's houses and like sort of stalking people, I guess would be sort of the way to say it.
Oh, really? You know, I've seen some of it and everything, and he comes to the festival. He's been like a guest speaker a few times and stuff, and I get so much stuff that's sent to me and everything. It's really hard for me to, you know, to look at everything and stuff. I think he was born and raised in Charleston, West Virginia, which is about an hour from Point Pleasant.
I know in one of the scenes he's driving up to people's houses and like kind of stalking people, and I think you're one of the people on there that he was actually sort of stalking.
Oh, really? I was?
Yeah.
I
was just wondering if you knew about that.
I haven't seen that part. I know that I think I did an interview with him real quick once, but I didn't know he was stalking me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, like he was driving up to your house and he was saying, "This is where Jeff Wamsley lives." Then he was talking to neighbors and things, going, "Hey, is he strange? Is he all there?" And asking stuff like that, like with strange off-the-wall questions.
Oh,
man, that's wild. I never knew that. I'll have to check that out. He's got two or three DVDs out, doesn't he? I mean, is it one of the early ones or one of the later ones?
I'd say $35 for on eBay recently, and I was really disappointed.
Oh, it's like 4 hours worth or 6 hours worth of stuff.
Yeah, it was like 30-something hours was the one I bought, and it was really hard to understand. And a lot of the movies are kind of driving around and.
Yeah. So what did they say about me? Did they say I was strange or what?
Well, I didn't really watch probably the first hour of it because then it started getting really slow. But they pulled up to one of your neighbors and was asking them if you were all there, if you were crazy, or if the people that lived in your house, if they had mental problems, and just strange off-the-wall things.
Now, that must have been over there in Point Pleasant. I mean, he obviously he doesn't know where I live at now. But he must have been over there in Point Pleasant. My mom still lives there. Maybe he asked my mom if I was crazy or something. I don't know.
I thought it was kind of funny.
That's a good one.
I thought it was kind of strange. Rather than just go talk to you, why they wouldn't just knock on the door or something?
Yeah, that's the first one I've heard of that one. So you know, so you are asking questions that nobody's ever asked me. That's a good one. Wow.
Well, also getting back on the Mothman, we have a couple of questions coming in. How many of the Mothman or Mothmen do you think that there are?
Well, that's a good question there because there were always theories that, you know, when all this was going on in Point Pleasant, that there may have been more than one. And the reason that that question came up was because the night that Linda Scarberry and her husband Roger and then another couple in the car, when they saw this thing at the North Power Plant and they watched it run into the building, well, they took off and went down the road and went out to Route 62. But she said as soon as they got out to the road, Route 62, they saw it standing by the road again, which would have just been a few minutes after they saw it there at the North Power Plant. So that kind of brought up theories that maybe there was more than one. But she said it looked at them like it knew that they were coming that way, like it was just waiting on them and stuff. So that would be concentrated at the Point Pleasant area. But what you're probably asking is, you know, there may be more around the world or the country or whatever.
I was saying like Bigfoot. Like for Bigfoot, for instance, I think there's probably about 5,000 North America, is what a lot of people say. I was going to say, do you think that there's like 20, 30 of these or more, or do you think there's like a large number of them?
It would be hard to really say. I mean, you know, until somebody really gets a good photo or picture or capture something like that, you know, it would be. That would be a hard one to answer, you know.
And also, do you think that the TNT area, just like the surrounding area, be able to support a big creature, is what another guy's asking?
You know, the TNT area is maybe, 3,000 square acres, I think. But there's so many people up there now, you know, looking and up there, you know, just riding around and everything. I would say by now somebody up there would have, you know, it's like that many years ago and even, you know, today. But, you know, there was never any physical evidence or anything. And nobody ever found any feathers or droppings. Or there was a couple footprints that the sheriff's deputies found up there around the North Power Plant the night that happened. But, you know, back then they weren't thinking about, you know, plaster casting or anything like that. You know, they were just thinking, you know, nobody's going to even be talking about this next week, so send these kids home and we'll be done with it. And then 45 years later, you know, people are still, you know, enthralled with the story and stuff. But, you know, it could be, you know, maybe that was just an isolated thing here in Point Pleasant, but it went on for about a year and a half. Actually longer than that. But, you know, when the bridge collapsed and everything, Silver Bridge fell, everybody's attention kind of went to that. They kind of forgot about the Mothman stuff, and went, you know, that bridge collapse really messed things up pretty good.
We got kind of a little weird question that's kind of off the wall.
Okay.
Someone right now is asking us about the Mothman cursed death list. I don't know if you've ever heard about that, or.
Yep. I've heard it.
Someone is asking us, are you afraid about that for some reason?
Not really. I mean, that's Lauren Coleman, you know, that did that, and you know, that's his take on that stuff. You know, the thing that I always kind of looked at that with, you know, and a lot of people, you know, just in the past year or so, there's been several key players in the Mothman story that's passed away, but it's the fact is they're in their 80s. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're really old.
When this happened back in '66, some of those people were in their 30s and 40s. do the math. You add 40 years to it, and you're 85 years old. You're going to die. Now, if it would have been like they were getting run over by steamrollers or pianos falling on them or something, you know what I'm saying? Then that would be kind of weird. I mean, I don't know. That whole death curse and that kind of stuff. Sometimes, I think that people think of the Mothman story and everything. They think that everybody that saw it was going to be, cursed for the rest of their life. Some of them, were, had some bad luck and stuff. But I just think that a lot of the people, that maybe, I don't even know if that list has been updated for a long time. But I think some of the people obviously were just old age and going to pass away and things like that. But I don't know. Hopefully it's not, not true. But I have read, looked at it and stuff.
Well, we have also some other reports, or other questions. Some guy's asking, have you ever heard of any kind of attack?
A physical attack?
Or like anybody getting scratched or anything? I know one of your books says that a guy said he was scratched or something.
Yeah, everybody that I've ever talked to said that it was almost as kind of curious about them as they were this thing. It never like jumped on anybody or tried to, attack them or anything like that. I think most people that saw it were getting out of there pretty quick. They weren't sticking around, except for the guy on the Monster Quest that got and threw the rocks at it and stuff. Faye DeWitt's brother. But then he quickly got into the car and they took off because it kind of came right back after them and stuff. But I've never ever talked to anybody that was physically attacked or anything.
Well, another thing that we're being asked right now is, I know how you probably heard about how people form teams to look for Bigfoot and things like that.
Right.
Would you ever form a team that looks for Mothman, or would just go to recent sighting areas and try to look for it or anything like that?
Well, for me personally, it would be hard for me to do just because of my schedule and time availability and that kind of thing. But we do have people come into the museum. We have a lot of paranormal groups that come in there, but they're usually looking for ghosts and stuff.
Yeah.
But, that's an idea. I mean, I don't know if I'd be able to spearhead something like that or not. But,
because we got a strange email not too long ago. There was
a lot of strange emails, don't you?
Yeah, we get probably about, I don't know, not as many as you, but we probably get like 20 emails every week or something about different things. But we got a TV thing. They were asking us if we wanted to go try to form sort of a Mothman group, and I wasn't sure if they asked you or if they wanted to, if they were going to try to do something like that. I wasn't sure.
Well, I get when the TV shows and stuff come in, like Monster Quest and things like that, I'm kind of like, I work with them as far as, setting up interviews with some of those witnesses and things like that. And there's been some of those shows I've actually went out with them and showed them a little bit about the TNT area and things like that. But as far as me heading up, an expedition out looking for it and stuff, it'd be hard for me to do that. And a lot of the interviews I do and stuff, and I know at the beginning you build me as a Mothman expert, which really, it's hard to be an expert sometimes. I mean, I've written a couple books about it, and I've interviewed a lot of people and stuff, but I wouldn't really call myself an expert because I don't think anybody will really ever be able to, explain really what it was fully. But I'm just, I would say, I research it a lot and I'm interested in it and stuff. But I even say that in the books. It's hard to be an expert in something sometimes if you're still curious about it and trying to find more information about it and everything. But but it's I think it's an open book. It's hard for people to really figure out what it was. But it's all documented. I mean, we have all the newspaper clippings, the press clippings. It wasn't just 3 or 4 people that were seeing it. There was a lot of people reporting sightings of this thing. If it was just 2 or 3 people, I would be skeptical of the whole thing too. But there was over 100 reported sightings just in that first year and a half.
Well, speaking of books and things like that, I would say, do you have any new books coming out or any TV appearances or anything?
Well, I have the 2 books. First one's Facts Behind the Legend, and then the second one's Behind the Red Eyes. The last TV thing that we did here was the Monster Quest, which we did that back last fall. But I get emails from TV stuff all the time, and I've actually lost track of how many we've done. And I think there's still a few of them out there that haven't ever been released or anything. So, but we've done Travel Channel, Unsolved Mysteries, Paranormal State, Monster Quest, history, all kinds of stuff, So, but it seems like every year there's always a major TV show coming along wanting to do something.
Do you think that you would write another book on the Mothman anytime soon? Or?
Yeah, I've started really kind of throwing some ideas around for a 3rd book, but I make sure that if I do a 3rd book, it's not going to. The first 2 books are totally different books, and that's the way the 3rd book would have to be.
Oh, you mean like to try to reinvent yourself? You mean?
Right. It would have to have some really major interviews in there. Really, really rare interviews and stuff, because there's still a few people out there that I would like to talk to, but they just refuse, interviews and things like that.
Well, another question that I was wondering was, for the people around the Point Pleasant area that you interview, or just where, like, when you go out and interview people, how do you find the Mothman and witnesses? I know it's not really like Bigfoot, where they're more widespread and more known.
Well, you have to remember I grew up in Point Pleasant, so my parents knew a lot of those people. I know people that know them, and you read a lot of the old newspaper articles, and their names are mentioned in there. Sometimes I'll get people come in the museum and say, hey, I was 14 years old when all that happened. I remember seeing it. Or my grandfather saw it, So I kind of track them down almost like a detective, And some of them will agree to interviews, and other ones will just flat out tell me that they don't want to talk about it anymore. They don't dispute that they didn't see it. They don't just say, we were making the whole thing up, but they'll tell me, they'll say, I just don't really want to talk about it anymore and stuff. Had several interviews for that 2nd book that were ready to go, and they backed out on me, just right at the last minute. So, and they just, some of them get a funny vibe about talking about it. They see stuff like that death curse list you were talking about.
Yeah.
Stuff like that on the internet, and then they start thinking, maybe I don't want to talk about it and stuff. So they get a funny vibe about some of it, And then some of them just don't like the ridicule that they get from it. It's still a small town, and everybody knows everybody, and then they see them on TV, and then, the neighbors are saying, so it's hard to tell. You get Andy Colvin showing up to their house.
Yeah.
I wanted to do an interview with him and stuff. Now, I like Andy. I mean, he comes to the festival and stuff, and he has his own take on it and stuff, and that's fine. I mean, I stick to pretty much what I'm doing, and I don't like for it to, turn into any, major debate or anything and stuff like that. So, but some people talk about it. Other people are just like tight-lipped, and they'll go to their grave, knowing what they know. So.
Well, another question that I was thinking was, on your website, it said something about there's a possible skull or skeleton found. I was going to say, is there any updates on any of that?
Well, that was in the newspaper. That was an article that we had in the newspaper, and some local guys found his skull. To me, it looked like a big, gigantic, like, turtle skull,
Yeah.
There was a picture of it in the paper, but, it was interesting. And they billed it as, could this be, the skeleton of Mothman or whatever stuff. But personally, to me, it just looked like one of these big, it wasn't really a snapping turtle, it didn't look like, but just a big turtle skull. It was interesting on that and stuff. And but we don't have the skull in the museum. They still have it in a private collection and stuff.
Mm.
So, but it would be kind of neat to get.
Speaking of the museum, I forgot to ask you, what's some of your exhibits at the museum, like some of your featured exhibits?
Well, we have a lot of movie props, used in the movie, Mothman Prophecies. We have a lot of rare John Keel stuff. Now, he passed away last July, and we have some stuff of his, rare stuff. we have a lot of the rare archives that were in that first book, along with a lot of those newspaper clippings, and we have some of the real police reports from that time, where people were going in and reporting to the police. We got a lot of people submit stuff, paintings and sculptures, and we got, Men in Black stuff in there. And we have like a media room in the back, where you can watch these documentaries, and monitors all throughout the museum where you can watch different shows and stuff. It's, when I first opened that, I kind of built it as a Mothman museum / research center, where people could come in and just sit down and just leaf through all the different books and things like that. So that's really what it is,
Well, speaking of the newspaper clippings and all that, do you get a lot of those donated, or do you have to go out and find them? Or
actually, most of that stuff that I got that was in my first book was owned by Linda Scarberry. She kept everything from when all that happened. And when I started working on my first book, she donated that to the project, because she was afraid that when the movie came out, it was all going to start all over again, the ridicule and people making fun of it and stuff. So she knew that my book was going to be a representation of what they saw, not what Hollywood was going to portray it as,
Yeah.
She was more interested in my book project than that movie, and she knew that if she gave me a lot of that stuff for that book, that I would use it, and which I did. I still have a lot of that that's not even out yet on display. She kept everything.
Well, Jeff. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, you mentioned the Men in Black about a minute ago. Have you had any experiences with Men in Black?
No, not as of yet, no. Just the IRS a few times, but other than that, Men in Black. That Men in Black stuff, came about with a lot of those witnesses, and John Keel talked about them in his book. They would show up to these witnesses' houses and just, tell them, look, just stay quiet about this whole thing, and it kind of intimidated a lot of them too. But that's one of the harder areas to get people to talk about, is those Men in Black people and stuff, because nobody knew if they were military or government agents or whatever, but they did actually feel good. So, but yeah, that's part of the Mothman story, is that Men in Black stuff.
Well, have you heard of any recent times with the Men in Black at all?
No, I don't really get a whole lot on that. Now, I've had people come in and tell me, that back then when all that was going on, that they saw these guys, they described them to a T. My mother even said she saw some of them downtown, during the 60s and stuff. And she told me that after the fact, after I wrote both of those books, But she was in the museum one day and seen the life-size Men in Black that we've got there that greets everybody when they come in, and she asked me what it was. I said, well, these were Men in Black. They were here to, people thought they were to intimidate the witnesses. And she goes, I remember them. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, I've seen them downtown, walking around all the time and stuff. So they stood out. They didn't really fit in to
Well, we have a question from a 207 area code, and you're on the air, 207.
Yes, hello. It's paranormal51.com. My name is John, and I wanted to make a comment about the Men in Black. I think I recall learning somewhere on one of the documents that is within our database that they're mind control agents from a different world, and mind control is really such a powerful technique to control population that I don't even really think that they need to expose themselves and to the general population. They can really do anything that they want with their own powerful cerebral cortexes, that they can essentially just imagine things to appear and imagine actions executed by humans to effect results that they want. And all they need is just a television camera. And so really, I don't know. I'm teetering on the side of both sides. Either they are being exposed to the general population, they are exposing themselves, or they are keeping to themselves. I really don't know. I can only speculate.
It's kind of a gray area, you know.
Yeah.
It's hard to decide. But John Keel always felt that way too about it, you know. But it's hard to get people to even talk about any encounters that they had with them because they just didn't know. You know what I mean? So it's a tough area to really get any concrete evidence of it or anything.
Yes, it is. I agree. I
Thanks
completely
for your
agree.
comment.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for the show.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. That was an interesting question. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I'm on his website right now, checking it out. It's it's a pretty comprehensive paranormal website. So I'd like to thank him, for coming on and sharing that interesting piece of information.
Well, Jeff, I have another quick question. We have somebody right now that's asking us, did the Mothman make any sort of sounds or any sort of vocalizations or anything that you heard of?
There was a few people that described it as making a high-pitched shriek like a mouse, but not too many. I always ask that, if it made any sounds or, anything like that. But there were a few that claimed that they could hear a high-pitched shriek, but not too many. I'd say out of 20 witnesses, maybe two of them would mention that and stuff. But that's a good question. I mean, it's, some of those documentaries, they put the sound effects in there and all that kind of stuff. But, not too many of them mentioned that.
Well, another thing was, do you think that the Mothman is some sort of nocturnal creature, since it's mostly seen at nighttime?
Well, there was a lot of daytime sightings, too. Most of the documented sightings were at night, but and because of the eyes, you see a possum at night or whatever, and they got the glowing eyes when your headlights of car hit it and stuff. That's what kind of brought that nocturnal deal up. But and the owls, the barn owls and things like that. But there, I've talked to people who saw it in broad daylight. So that there again, I don't know. It could be as far as a nocturnal type animal or bird or something like that. But not too many of them had the glowing red eyes. That's the catch right there.
We have another question. You should be calling in a minute. But anyways, I have another quick question while I wait for him to call in. I was just wondering, have you ever investigated Bigfoot or ghosts? Are you interested in any of that sort of thing?
Well, it's interesting to me, but there again, the time factor, I really haven't had time to, to do any of that now. I talk to a lot of people, that come into the museum and stuff, but I don't really actively, go out, looking for any of that stuff or anything. As a matter of fact, with the Mothman stuff, I'm usually so busy with the museum and everything, it's hard to get out. But I do have a lot of acquaintances that do that,
Yeah.
And it sounds like an interesting field, but time is of the essence anymore for me. It seems like it's hard to really do it right if you're going to do it.
And there's another guy. I guess he's not going to call in, or he might in a minute. He was asking me, what do the men in black look like generally? That's the reports.
Most of the people that were seeing these men in black described them as olive complexion, pale-skinned. Mary Hire, who wrote for the newspaper in Point Pleasant, she was the one that put all this stuff in the newspapers. She kind of joined forces with John Keel when he came to town, and she would get frequent visits at her house and at her office downtown, and she said that they were very peculiar. They would walk into her office and kind of stare. She said the thing that she remembered the most about these men in black was when she would talk to them, that they would never blink their eyes, that they would just, it was a cold stare. And she thought that was odd, that they never blinked their eyes or anything. So they had very pointed fingertips. They would pick up a household item or an office. She said they'd pick up like a pencil and stare at it like they didn't really know what it was or anything. So
Like, you think that they're alien-like? Or you think it's the government people? Or?
She did. Of course, she died years ago. And John Keel, I think, felt the same way. That kind of got that alien factor up,
Okay, I know. I was going to ask a similar question, but I didn't know how to really word that. Another thing was, do you think that if the government was in town, or the Men in Black, or just these strange people, do you think that could have been that it was, like, you think maybe it was alien-like, or why do you think the government cared so much?
Well, if it was the government, I don't think there's really any solid proof that that it was. I mean, most of the time back in the 60s, like that, with all these UFO sightings and stuff, the first person that would show up to your doorstep would be somebody like from the Air Force. It wouldn't usually be the police or anything, but the Air Force was more interested, I think, in that UFO stuff than the local law authorities and stuff. So that's the military base, which in the TNT area, was surrounded by the National Guard Armory anyway. So you had a lot of military presence, and you still do in Point Pleasant. There's an active National Guard detachment up there all the time. So whether or not that was true, nobody really came out and said, hey, we're from the the CIA or Air Force or whatever. Mary Howard said that they would never really tell her who they were working for or whatever. They just told her basically to shut up. Keep her mouth shut about it.
Well, I know that I was in the Mothman prophecies. It said that her death was kind of mysterious, that it might have been the government.
Well, she died of heart failure, but she was only 54 years old, which is relatively young. But what's kind of strange about the whole thing is she didn't have any kids, no children. Her husband died a few years before she did, and she really left no survivors except for a couple nieces. And one of those nieces I know, and I've talked to her before, and I asked her point blank if this Men in Black stuff really actually happened, and her answer was yes. She told me that it did happen, and that her aunt was very concerned about who they were. Now, there's no documentation or anything that says, I've heard all kinds of stories about her autopsy reports and all that kind of stuff, But, I think she just had a heart attack, Now, that could have been brought on by the stress and things like that of the whole situation stuff. Who knows? I mean, but that's another facet of the Mothman story there.
It's a Mothman.
Well, we just got an email. A guy was wondering, are you doing any more of your bus tours? And also another question, while adding on to that, what's featured at the festival this year also is what the guy was asking.
Okay. Yeah, we do those bus tours, not as much in the wintertime as we do in the summer. We post those bus tour schedules on the website, so you can get on there. I think we do them every other weekend now, but soon as Memorial Day hits, we up it a little bit and do it like 3 weeks out of the month or whatever. The festival is the third weekend in September, and what we have there is we have all kinds of vendors. We have guest speakers, authors. We have Mothman witnesses there. Some of those original witnesses are there to meet people and answer the questions firsthand. We have live bands that play. We have we do the hay rides at night. We take you on a little tour of the TNT area and stuff. We have a tram that takes you all around Point Pleasant. There's a lot in Point Pleasant there. Besides the Mothman Festival or the museum, you have the River Museum. You have the Fort Randolph. So if you're interested in some of the history of Point Pleasant, it's a good place to, good time to go around and look at a little bit of everything and stuff. But it's a unique festival. I mean, it's different. I don't think the locals are still used to, all these people showing up like that.
Yeah. We have about 4 minutes left in the show, but I was going to ask another question of mine that I just thought of just now.
Okay.
Have you ever interviewed any sort of the Indian tribes or Native American people in the area and asked if they've seen the Mothman?
Not really. No, I haven't. That's a good question. I've talked to a couple of reenactors and stuff that are really into the Indian background and stuff, but it's no, that might be something to think about, for the next book. But there's plenty of those people here. I mean, like I said, it's really rich in Indian, Native American Indian history and stuff. I'll keep that in mind, though.
And I thought that was a cool idea. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
You said there's like
do that. You probably might have one more time than I do, but that's something you might want to think about.
Yeah. And also, do you know of what was I thinking? Any other researchers that are pursuing the Mothman, like besides you and Lauren Coleman, like any?
Well, I meet a lot of people that come to the festival and things like that. I think there's some of the people are authors. Some of them are actually researchers and stuff. I'm a collector. I mean, I collect a lot of memorabilia and things like that too. But you got Andy Colvin and Lauren Coleman. There's different people that come along that write about it and things like that. I can't think of anybody right off the top of my head. Of course, John Keel was the grandfather of the whole thing, and I had plenty of chances, to meet with him and talk with him about it and stuff. So I was glad that I was able to do that. But I'm sure there'll be more coming along. So good luck to them. Hopefully they can find out some concrete evidence or whatever. It's a tough cookie to crack, I think.
Yeah, some guy just wrote and said that, do you think that's a Mothman? And I don't know if you ever heard of the Braxton County monster incident.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were just wondering, how far away is Point Pleasant from that happened?
That was in Braxton County, West Virginia, about 2.5 hours. There's Frank Fascino is a friend of mine too. He wrote a couple books about the Braxton County deal. Now that happened in 1952. So that was a little earlier, but that's kind of a neat story too. They actually had a little festival there, and Frank he's been to the Mothman Festival before too. As a matter of fact, I got an email from him today, and he's going to be on Monster Quest this coming Wednesday at 9:00 for lizard monsters or something like that. But I guess there's a section in there about the Braxton County monster, so you might tell your listeners maybe to check that out.
I was going to say that interests me too.
Yeah, this coming Wednesday at 9:00, and then the Mothman episode that we were on and stuff is probably being reruns for a long time. So probably.
I know that was on yesterday. I think it was.
It was. It's hard to tell. I'll turn the TV on and it'll be on there, and I'll never know sometimes. But
I know you're on the Travel Channel a lot too. Like I think you're on one or two shows.
Yeah, Travel Channel. They still run that, So I never know when it's going to be on unless I turn the TV on and stuff. But it's a good show, the Monster Quest. I think that's probably one of the biggest shows out there right now for people.
Well, we have about 1 minute left in the show. I was going to say if you wanted to say any of your links or anything about books or anything before we have to end the show.
MothmanLives.com is pretty much the main site, but we have MothmanFestival.com and then MothmanMuseum.com. So, if you want to send me an email, all the emails on those websites go to me. Those, if I can and stuff. So, but I welcome any reports, questions, or whatever.
Well, thanks for doing an interview with us, Jeff.
I appreciate it.
We'll have to talk again sometime.
Yeah, just let me know. Maybe we can do something before the festival. And,
we might actually come out for the festival this year, and if we can't, for sure the next year.
Yeah, try to visit the museum, if you can. But just drop me a line, and hopefully, I can be there when you're there and stuff. But appreciate the opportunity, to be on the show, and sounds like you've got a lot of active listeners. I think this is one of the few interviews I've done where we've had so many people call in.
Yeah.
So that's good. But good luck.
Thank you. Jeff.
Okay, we'll see you.
I'll speak to you again soon.
Okay, thanks.
Bye. Talk to you later.